Another One Show.
Time coming up to 20 to 2. It was a desperate time in Britain during World War II, and the Allies would do anything to break the stalemate between the two powers, even attempt to turn Hitler into a woman. British advisors were desperate to gain the upper hand in the war, putting estrogen, why am I saying oestrogen? Putting estrogen in Hitler's food, and water was just one of their suggestions, according to a new book by Professor Brian Ford. And I'm pleased to say that Brian joins me now. Hello there.
I like the idea. We could have converted Hitler into an ostrich. Now that would have been amusing. Ostrichen. Control yourself, lad. You can't corpse. This is live radio.
Oh, dear me. Right, shall we move on with a proper interview now?
You're not thinking of giving up the day job, are you?
Right, you can't be telling me that this was seriously considered.
Oh, yes, it was. There were lots of wacky ideas in World War II. I mean, people were desperate. And, in fact, Lord Hankey, who was one of Churchill's advisors on security, actually had a note put in the national press to say, can all scientists with, you know, great and unusual ideas get in contact with us, because we need to mobilise every scientist in Britain to fight back against the Nazis. So there were all sorts of strange and weird ideas that went round. One I like was from South Africa. Drop boxes of poisonous snakes all over the Nazi troops. That wasn't bad, was it? There was another great one from Italy. They said, drop a load of big bombs into the crater of Vesuvius, and then we could flood all of the Italian Nazis with lava.
Oh, this is just incredible. And
then, come along now, wait. Shortly after Fidel Castro took power in Cuba, the Americans had an idea to invent an exploding cigar and send him that. And yet in World War II, the Nazis had the idea to get exploding chocolate and send that to the King of England. So, I mean, you know, what goes round comes round. It isn't all new.
Tell you what, it just goes to show, doesn't it, that although there were many brave, men fighting on the front line, there was an opportunity to almost become a hero behind the scenes, wasn't there?
Many of them were heroes behind the scenes. I mean, I knew the designer of the bouncing bomb, Barnes Wallis. And it's amazing, you know, how lots of people at home would have seen the Dam Busters movie. And yet I bet you don't realise that lots of the story was missed out, because even when that movie was made, years after the war, it was still secret. The whole way in which that bomb worked was that it had backspin. There was a motor to get the bomb spinning furiously before it was dropped onto the water. But the military authorities would not allow the filmmakers to mention backspin, because even long after the war was over, it was still regarded as a secret. And many of the papers I've been looking at in recent years have been released in the last sort of 5 or 10 years or so, and many of the stories have never yet come out before.
Well, obviously, the bouncing bomb was a success. Is there any...
No, wait. It isn't as simple as you think. People always say the bouncing bomb was a success and were they heroes. But, although nothing's been said about it, but I have mentioned it in my book, which is called... what's it called? Secret Weapons, and comes out in a month's time. Although you can order it online.
Beautifully done.
Yeah, rush to your computers.
It was beautifully done.
But the point is that the flooding of the Ruhr valleys killed tens of thousands of war prisoners, many of them women from Russia and other innocent people. And in fact, that kind of bombing raid, which we regard as heroic, would now be regarded as a war crime. They changed the Geneva Convention to make the destruction of dams where there are innocent people living downstream a war crime. So even that, looked at in a new perspective, is not the way that we think.
How many of these kind of weird and wonderful ideas almost came to be? You know, like for instance, you know, doing something with Hitler in his water and putting bits and pieces in. Were these just ideas, or did they ever get close to happening?
Oh, they did get quite close to happening. The hormones in his food would have worked, because we did have agents who were close to Hitler.
Not that close.
Almost, but I mean, the craziest one was the Panjan drum, which they invented. They built it in East London and tested it out in the West Country and Westward Ho. And it was going to be a huge Catherine wheel with rockets all the way around that would roll up the beaches of Normandy and destroy the defensive wall. But A, there was no defensive wall, and B, it didn't work anyway. I mean, because the rockets were fixed all around the rim of this thing, there were as many rockets blowing backwards as forwards, so it never would have gained any forward momentum. And they spent, I don't know, modern money, £10 million, I suppose, trying to perfect this ludicrous idea, although simple science would have shown them it never could have worked.
And can you just clarify that there was never an attempt to turn Hitler into an ostrich?
And not until the beginning of this programme when I began to wonder whether it just might have been on the cards.
Listen, real pleasure. It sounds like a fabulous book. Tell us the name of it again.
It's called Secret Weapons, and I must tell you, it's 100,000 words long, and every single word I really enjoyed writing.
Well, you can tell just by hearing you talk. Lovely talking to you, Professor. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Professor Brian Ford, well, that sounds like an absolute cracker, doesn't it? And apologies. When I do stuff like that, I do make myself laugh, and sometimes I have to control myself, especially when the guest takes the mickey out of you. It's even better.